Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and I have done so many episodes of this podcast that you could start listening to them on Monday and go non-stop until Saturday. This chat is with an extremely seasoned Disney animator with more than 30 years experience in the industry over 4 countries, Michael Surrey. So currently Michael serves as the creative director of story and animation at Spire Animation Studios. And in our chat, he's going to share how he got his big break at Disney back in the 90s, then the crazy thing he did to jump from intern to full-time animator to supervising animator and beyond, to work on films like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. Plus, he's going to share what he's learned about pursuing a lasting and fulfilling career in animation without burnout. So now, without further ado, let's jump into the chat. Hi, Mike. Thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Terry, I'm doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. As always, I'm excited to chat. And let's start off with some of the tough questions. Because you've had a great Disney career, worked on all the fun films that everybody in the world grew up watching. Tell me about the non-fun, non-easy, tough to get through parts of being a glorious Disney animator over the years.
Well, I'll have to start a little bit before I got to Disney, which is just to say that the journey to get to Disney took about from school, graduating from Sheridan in '87 to getting to Disney in 1990. So there's about 3 years of jumping around. So I was in school in New York, Long Island, New York Institute of Technology, on a scholarship to work on a movie / get a degree. So it was kind of like, come down here to the US, you'll be here on a student visa, but hey, we'd like you to work on our movie while you're down here, but we'll get you a degree. And I was like, all right, well, that sounded great. But the problem was that they weren't very organized. They didn't have it all put together. And it was a bit of a thing for me to notice that in the animation world, we just weren't on the grid at all. Like nobody knew we were there. That's when I met my wife, and then we had our daughter, and I realized, wait a minute, I need to make money to sort of support this. And so I put my name out there to all the studios: Disney Florida, Disney Australia, Disney California, Universal in London, I just anywhere. So whoever says yes, we go there. And timing wise, I got a yes from England for Universal, but a month later, Disney said, we'll take you in California. But also in between that, I had 3 rejections from Disney. So it was
you just didn't take no for an answer, I guess.
Right. And then what it was is just sort of like submitting your work and then having them look at it and say, no, you don't have it. No, you're not what we're looking for. And then I went, okay, well, what if I rearrange it? What if I do this? Send it in again. And then they kind of went, no. And then I sort of talked to a friend of mine who says, well, maybe if you put this here and did that. And then it was a bit of a connection to say, maybe that worked for him. It might work for you. And so I submitted again to their review board. But at that moment, I got accepted in a Universal in London. So I'm going to go to London. But then all of a sudden I get this letter saying, guess what? You're in Disney now. So I had
this was the exact same portfolio of pieces, just reorganized in a different way.
Reorganized it.
So you weren't, what?
Well, what happens, I think because the review board, it depends on again, I got behind the curtain when I got to Disney to see it because I was eventually on that review board, but you see that there's certain people in the room that I'm not in their crosshairs. So they just go, no, pass. But it just turned out that one time I rearranged it. It happened to be at a time where A, they were looking for trainees, and B, there were people in the room that were really the people that I would be working with. And they said, yeah, we like his stuff. He's a yes.
Is it still like that or?
It is a little bit like that. I think it's sort of the review process obviously has changed over the decades because it's more digital based, but still kind of can be the same where you submit your work. And I always tell students, if you're going to submit anything, make sure your best stuff is the first stuff you see.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people are reviewing not just your portfolio, but maybe 10, 15 others. And again, they just go, okay, let me go through it, click, click, click. I'm 5 in. No, let me go to the next. But if your best stuff is up front, it's the best representation of who you are as an artist.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine they're getting like thousands of applications all over the world. It's
yeah.
like you've got 1 second to impress. So thinking back to your application versus, being on that review board yourself now, what is
Mhm.
something that stood out in your portfolio or, would carry through and still stand out now to show that you have what it takes,
I have
not
what
the
it
first
takes.
two rounds.
Well, I think I had heard that the one thing that sort of sold me to them was not so much my drawing ability. It was more the acting, the acting in the animation that I was doing sort of
Mm,
made them think, well, he's just fresh out of school, more or less, a year or so, and he's doing kind of good acting animation. So that to somebody who's going to be my mentor can work with that. And the drawing part, they have classes, they have ways for you to get better at that. I mean, I was okay. I wasn't horrible, but I mean,
yeah,
but I had some work to do. But they thought that's fine. We can get him better. But when somebody has good timing in their work, that's not always easy to train or teach. It,
interesting.
it
Because
takes it takes a bit of time.
I would assume now, because there's so many applications, that you just need to have what they want immediately versus somebody that they want to train a little bit more. Is that true?
I think so. I think it's a little the window of training, I think, is smaller now in some ways, where people are a little less willing to take the risk on, and it could be just because of the volume of people that are applying. Back, sort of, this is 1990, so animation was not dead, but it wasn't massive like it is now. I mean, you had Disney had Little Mermaid, had Roger Rabbit, and it was starting to blossom again as far as being like, wait a minute, Disney, we can make the idea of an animated musical was starting to be born then. So that was becoming like a renaissance of sorts for Disney. So a lot of people were, I just happened to get in at that point. So I think about 2 or 3 years later from that date, there was a flooding of people coming in, and they were like, oh, there's too many portfolios. We're getting all these portfolios. We have to go through all of these, but we don't have any positions for anybody. And then they started creating a training program, mentors, and usually they might be having like 4 mentors, but now they're having like maybe up to 10,
Mm,
10 or 12. So it's just on the need, I think, for what when I applied for it, it was a little bit more, you know there wasn't that many to fight with. Now
yeah,
I think there's just so many places to go for
right.
for your jobs. I mean, it's not just Disney or Pixar or DreamWorks, and there's a lot of
There's
places where
there's
people can work.
Spire Animation.
Fire Animation, yeah, that's right. They're up and comings.
Yeah. So okay, so you're fresh out of school for a couple of years. You've been around the block studio wise. You just got your big break and
Mhm.
you're like, "Hey, wife and kid, let's
Yep.
pack up and leave and stay here for the next 30 years."
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think back then it was more like, okay, let's go out there for a couple of years and see how it goes.
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
everywhere I'd worked up to that point was always only 2 or 3 years. I was completely thinking this is going to be like a short-term
So
gig.
what happened?
I guess I did pretty good, so they kept me for a couple of decades, so it was all right. But
So how did you, because Disney has always been the premier place to to want to become an animator, et cetera. How did you make yourself stand out while you were there to keep being there and make this a career and work your way up and work on all these films? Like
well,
what was your secret sauce to success while you're there? And
well,
don't just tell me like work hard.
no,
Maybe.
yeah, no, well, that is part of it, but I think I realized when I was there that I mean, you have to get past the idea like, oh, I've got a job, yay, I'm working at Disney, all right, awesome. And then you realize the history, right? You realize the amount of history, and then you're working on so my first feature there was Beauty and the Beast. So you're working on a movie and you're thinking, wait a minute, this is a Disney movie and it's going alongside all these other Disney movies. So you get a little overwhelmed and starstruck by that. The great thing about Disney, they have a research library, which has all those old movies that you
Yeah.
can go into and go, hey, could I look at a scene from Pinocchio? And they go, yeah, sure, here you go. And you could look at it. And
Wow.
that didn't help because that intimidated me more.
Yeah.
But what it did do is it sort of started to show me what I had to do in order to stay. So the
Hmm.
whole goal is to stay there. And what I did is I realized, okay, I need to do work on my own. I have to work outside of my day job, which was assisting other animators. So I had to do my own work at night. So a lot of times I would work till 6, go home, help take care of my daughter, and then my son was born. So I'm now go home, take care of kids until about 9, and then I'd come back to work and work till about midnight or 1, just in time to feed and take care of my son as he's getting up, put him to bed, go to bed, start the whole day over again. And
Wow.
I did that for, well, it seemed like a couple of years.
When you
And
say
that's
go
really
back, when you say go back and work, are you working on the project or are you doing your own
doing
personal
my
work?
own work. So
So what
doing
did
my own,
that mean? You're just doing animation exercises?
yeah. Well, so I decided I'm going to take one of the characters from Beauty and the Beast and do an animation test, because
Huh.
as a trainee, you get reviewed every 3 months, and they want to see, okay, is this person getting it? Should we keep them? Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't continue with this person, or should we promote them?
Hmm.
So the goal obviously is to be promoted. So I just wanted to just put my head down and go, I'm just going to do a kick-ass test and try to just show them that I can do it. And I put everything I knew at the time into it. And I thought, well, okay, this will be a way to showcase what I can do and what I can give them. Now I'll say this, I didn't know everything about how to animate, like the technical sides of it. I just winged it. I've a little smoke and mirrors
Yeah.
at the beginning stages, because I just thought, I know how to do it. I just don't know how to do it the way they do it. So let me just do it the way I know, which is, not to get over into the weeds of it, but it's like drawing 1, then drawing 2, then drawing 3, and
So
then
like
going
straight
that way,
ahead.
versus doing drawing 1, drawing 13, drawing 21, and then you figure out the stuff in
Yeah.
between. I didn't have the brain capacity to figure
And
that
they
out.
didn't teach that back at Sheridan in the 80s.
Well, they did, but it was still like, just to get your head around, how
Yeah,
do I
yeah,
know
yeah.
where to be on frame 13 and frame 25? I don't know,
Totally.
but I know how to move it. If I had to move something through, that's okay. That's how it moves. I'll just draw how it moves in real time.
When you were going back to the studio till midnight, were you the only guy there and the janitor maybe, or there's all the other trainees joining you?
No, I was pretty much, it was me and maybe a handful of other people working in production that were
Wow.
just working late. But yeah, it would just be, most cases, it would be me.
So tell
So
me, you got the promotion?
I did. At the end of that, I got promoted to animator. I
Oh,
went from
wow.
animating assistant to animator, and I was now an animator on Aladdin.
Amazing. Well, how
Um,
many other people of the trainees at the time were promoted like that as well?
I think there was 8 all together, but only 3 or 4 of us got promoted.
Nice. And those 3 or 4, were they going extra hard just like you were?
Well, I don't think some of them may have. I don't think they did, because I knew at that stage, even for me, I had to
Ah,
work a little harder to get to where other people were just like, oh, I got it.
gotcha.
And it's
So you're
all
very self-aware of your own skills.
limitations.
Well, amazing. I mean, 30 years later, you're getting a congratulations from me, but congratulations. That's
Uh,
awesome. You like really strategized, made this happen. That's amazing.
yeah, I just sort of realized that the only way I'm going to get to that next level is I'll just have to work harder at it. And yeah,
Yeah.
I just said, you work hard at it and you get it. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that's
yeah,
the
I
truth.
understand.
Sadly, I mean,
Animation is hard work.
yeah. But the good thing about animation is that beginning stages of working hard, you see improvement. You start to see in yourself that you're getting better. And sometimes the great thing about, at least with Disney, is that I'm working with an animator who's been doing it for 10 years, and they're showing you things that you didn't know. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. And then now I have that, and I can go back and I can apply that to my toolbox.
Right.
And it was just that collection of working with people on Beauty and the Beast, and then on Aladdin, working with Glenn Keane, who I admired like massively in school. So
Yeah.
now I'm working with him, and he's giving me one on, like, it's getting your own personal teacher to show you
Yeah.
how to do it. And I was like,
What was the biggest learning you got from Glenn Keane specifically, if you can recall?
well, 2 things. One is pretty basic, and one was eye opening to me, which is just clarity in your poses. How you draw something to make it read very clearly. And to fast forward just that thought into story, it's a massive help in story to be able to do that. It's just being able to make things read very clearly and clean when you're posing out your characters. And that was super helpful for me to see how he would explain it, how one side of the character can have lots of cuts and in a silhouette, and the other side is a nice smooth line. It just gives a very pleasing shape, and you'll always find yourself doing that when you're posing out characters. And I went, oh, and as I was doing it, you could see, oh, okay, this is what he was talking about. Yeah. And that was kind of like a big moment. The one that's more basic that I probably should have known is how you draw eyes, and I was just horrible at drawing eyes. And
aren't we all? Isn't everybody?
Well, yeah, and because we are
Are you drawing some eyes right now?
I am on camera, so I'm going to show you. I'll show you so this is what I used to, like, if you had to have a character looking left or right,
yeah,
I would draw the eyeball, and I'll just draw one eyeball. So I would draw the eyeball like that, like a circle.
Right.
Circle
with the pupil on the end.
Yes.
I feel like I already know what you're going to draw on the next one.
Yeah, see, I'm like, this is where I learned how to do that.
Yeah, you got to perspectivize that pupil.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just looks like a goofy.
But I mean, when he did it, I went, oh man, I should know how to do that. So here I am, 1993-ish too. I've been at the studio and working professionally for 3 or 4 years, and I'm just now learning how to do eyeballs.
Well, nobody told you before, Glenn Keane.
I know. Well, maybe they did. I just didn't pick it up. But
you didn't pick it up because it wasn't Glenn Keane telling you. So you've worked from 2D to 3D to storyboard. Maybe can you go over some highlights of your career at Disney and how you ended up to where you are now?
Sure. So getting the promotion to work with Glenn was a huge thing for me, just because I was a super admirer of his, and I learned a lot. That then segued into getting promoted again at the end of Aladdin to supervising animator on Lion King, to work on the meerkat Timon.
Yeah.
Which was my first chance to lead a character, which means you get to have your hands in on designing him, what he's going to look like, and then you now have a crew of people with you. So you're now responsible for, let's say, 5 or 6 other people's work. Massively intimidating, but I did the same thing like I told you before when I did the test. I did the same thing. I did a test on my own at Christmas time. Around Christmas, I stayed and I worked, and I did a bunch of tests of Timon to show the directors, like, yeah, you picked the right guy.
Amazing.
And they told me actually 10, 12 months later, hey, that test you did, that's what made us feel comfortable having you do the character.
You don't have you don't have these tests online anywhere, do you?
I don't, but I think I could probably dig it up.
That would be cool to see. Random interjection. How is your social life during all this time, especially around Christmas when you're supposed to be buying gifts and seeing friends? And
well, it's.
Do you ever think back, and because also you had 2 small kids and you're working late, do you ever think back and wish you had, I don't know, done things differently or spend more time not working? I'm just curious. I don't know if I said that in a bad way.
No, I think there is sacrifices that you do unknowingly at the time.
Yeah.
I think my brain was just thinking, if I do this and I do it well, then everybody will be better off. We'll all be better off. Like they'll like what I'm doing. The company will then see the benefit of having me, and that'll benefit all of us. So it was always in my head that way.
And what is internally driving you? At the start, it was, I have to feed my family. And at this point, you have some stability. What is it? Is it the love for the craft? Is it, still wanting to make more money and make more of a career? Like, what is the underlying drive to keep you doing this very tedious, very skill-based art career for so long?
Well, the two things that, and I know this 100% of me, is my family. That was the number one drive, and also the love of doing the animation, because I don't think you cannot do animation if you do not love it. To your point, you said the word tedious. It can be, and if you don't love it, you are looking at a clock and you are just wanting this thing to be done. And you get those moments, but the overall feeling is the love of it always comes back in to make you work a little harder. And you go, if it's 2D or if it's CG, you're still going to go, well, it looks good. And then you're just thinking, well, wait a minute, if I just do a little bit more,
Right.
maybe if I fix it just a little bit more, it'll be better.
Right.
Before you leave for the night, you'll just do let me just try one more thing. I mean, that's love that's making you do that.
Oh yeah, I get that, where it's like I have to stop at some point because I'll just focus on this 1 second forever, because you can just keep improving it forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that element is very much the case of anybody, I think, that does it for a long time. 2D, again, in the traditional format, we didn't know that there was an easier way to do it because it hadn't been really invented yet as far as CG animation. So the only way to do it was the way we were doing it. And you loved it. You loved having that ability to draw the character, have it do whatever you wanted it to do.
Yeah.
It was a pretty powerful tool. And then the fact that that this is helping support the other love in your life, which is your family, that's I mean, I never felt like I had a job. I didn't feel like I ever was working.
Nice.
It just felt like all of a sudden money would show up in your bank and you go, oh, right, they pay me for this. Okay, good. Right. Oh, that's cool.
Have you ever felt that sounds like an amazing feeling. Have you ever felt that there was something more that you wanted out of a career, and because this career is fulfilling a lot of things for you? It's great, your time, your hobby, basically your family, your creative mind, your etc. So is there anything more, I guess, now that you've jumped into a different role with Spire, that you are aspiring to include in this, or is it just an evolution? That was a really convoluted question.
Well, but I think it is an evolution of, like, your mindset. Certainly early on in your career is really just about the craft itself, right? So you're just like, I just want to control this character. And I mean, if I used the idea of being an animator to being a supervising animator to going into story to now where I sit as a creative director. So if I think of that path, early on, you're just thinking about, I just want his hands to move. I just want to make him feel like he's really, I'm going to draw that. It's going to look so real. And you're getting all caught up in that. And then when you're supervising, I want the character to look good. I want everybody's work to look good. I want to make sure that I fix his or her drawings and make them read better. And so you're helping bringing up other people. To story, which is now all of a sudden, you're not just thinking about a moment within a movie, you're thinking about massive sections of the film. So you have control over having script pages, and then you're creating the visuals, the first visuals for a script. So you have a lot of control over, like, not just moments, but sequences, like chunks of the film. And that's kind of empowering as well.
Yeah.
And it's the only part within a pipeline of making an animated movie where outside of the actor performing the lines of a character in a movie, you're the only voice of that character, right? So it's kind of a cool feeling when you get a script and they go, okay, we're going into story, and then you do a sequence, and now you're pitching your sequence to everybody in the room, and it's the first time they're hearing the words of the characters. And it's your visuals, it's your camera work. So it's a pretty kind of powerful position to be in, but it's also nerve-wracking. But but at the end of it, you just think, well, that's kind of a cool job to have.
Totally.
And now as a creative director, it's sort of being on the other side of it, sort of being on the receiving end of that. I don't get to draw as much as I used to. I still try to draw when I can, but I don't get to get in there and. So I get to see other people's work.
You can't have it all, Mike. You can't have
no.
I was just thinking, because some people get into story as the first thing, and like, that's what they do, versus you unintentionally, I guess, started as that, like, you've been through all the minute to the large scale pieces in between. So you have kind of a unique perspective of how everything operates and all the people involved. Do you think that gives you a specific advantage in creating better story than somebody who just only focuses on story and that's their whole thing? I'm just speculating.
I don't think so. I think the only advantage it might give you is that, your drawing skills maybe have been more polished over time because you've been having to do it so much.
Right.
So you get a little bit more versed at that. So that's not an issue when you go into story. It's more people that just go into story early on, and I'm talking like in the 90s, some of them really wanted just to do story. They want to write stories, they want to tell stories. So they would go there right out of the gate, right? Then there's those people that were like, well, I can't draw those characters the way they want me to draw them. It's just I just can't do that. I'm just not that. My style isn't that style.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they would go, well, but I can do that in story. That's fine. And so they would gravitate to story. But there's a lot of animators that go into story that find themselves doing animation in story, and it's like, no, time out. Too many drawings. You don't need to do all those drawings. You can just do 1, 2, 3. You don't have to do 50. So there's a mindset that has to go with being a story artist from being an animator.
Yeah.
You have to start to think bigger picture, not moments. And
Gotcha.
it can be a little bit of an adjustment, and I've known several animators that have made that adjustment, but it's not for everybody though.
Right. I think it took you away from going through the highlights of your career. So I'll let you finish that.
Well, so anyways, I go to Lion King. Lion King becomes an unexpected massive hit. And I'll tell you the inner story, which is inside the studio. That's when Disney decided to go from doing 1 movie to doing 2. So there was a Lion King and Pocahontas. And then at that point,
this story is very infamous in animation school.
Yeah, it's and I'm, being there to see that Lion King was sort of filled with a couple of superstars, but veteran animators, but the rest of us were kind of newbies. Pocahontas was stacked with like your John Pomeroy, your Glenn Keane, and Mike Gabriel was directing, Eric Goldberg, all of them were over there. So everybody like that had some sort of like need to want to be around the superstars, want to go to Pocahontas.
Yeah.
So even Jeffrey at the time was like, who was running the animation department, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and he was like, he had a meeting of all of us for like a breakfast, directors, producers, animators, and said, really excited about our lineup. It's going to be great. Lion King, well, we'll see what that does. But Pocahontas, now there's a movie. And he was very much about Pocahontas. And we're all like, oh, what? So now we felt like this underdog. And
that sucks.
And again, it was. I mean, and then it just, and he says, if it makes over, I think it was, the quote was, I think if it makes over $100 million, you'll have me on my knees, I'll bow down to you.
Did he?
It made $100 million. We had a party to celebrate him making $100 million. And he did. He goes, all right, I said I do it.
Well, so, I'll tell you, I was, I don't know how old I was, like 10 or something when those, maybe even younger. I saw both of those in theaters and I instantly forgot about Pocahontas and was obsessed with Lion King. So.
Well, it was kind of interesting to me on a completely, and this maybe fits into your day job into the world of marketing, but it just as interesting even at that point, because Disney put out a movie almost every year, and the fan base and the desire and the need for it grew. Mm-hmm. So Aladdin comes out, and then they're all going, okay, so next June or July, next summer, we're going to have another one. What is it? And they're going to go, no, we don't have anything. And everybody was just like, wait a minute, what? Because it was about a 1.5 year gap between Aladdin and Lion King. So there was this massive want, like, what's next? Let's see it. And our producer,
Aladdin was my favorite, and I've watched it so many times when I was a kid.
And I think it just fed people's desire to see what's next, and then and again, I don't know who the brainchild was behind this, but I'm sure Don Hahn, our producer, was part of it. Was to put out that the opening of the movie with the moon or the sun coming up and all the animals, and that was just a trailer. They just put that out. Didn't say anything about. And you just saw that, and it made people crazy. Like, oh my God, like, when's this coming out? So it built all this momentum. And I guess the magic of it is that it delivered. It had, Elton John, you had Tim Rice, you had characters that were engaging. You have some heartfelt moments of a father being killed and the son being separated and not understanding it. Like, you had all these moments in there that were just a perfect recipe for what they were trying to deliver. And I think that's what made it just go bonkers. And I thought, did somebody plan that? I just always wondered, did somebody figure out how to, like, we just hold it back, tease a little bit, I don't know.
Internally, did you think it was going to be a success yourself working on it, or you still felt second rate to the Pocahontas guys?
You know what? The Pocahontas thing didn't really affect us. I think it was more just, we didn't want to be below Aladdin. So we like whatever Aladdin's box office was, we just wanted Lion King to be higher. So then we would think, okay, well, we did good if we got this movie to be higher than Aladdin, which, everybody loved. And we thought, okay, if we can do that, success. And then it just went, crazy. And it's very overwhelming at that time, but that's where life really changed for a lot of us. I think not just creatively, but, financially. I mean, that was a big change for a lot of us.
So you were making more money afterwards because it did so well?
Yeah, because the studios realized, that people working on these films, they would give them bonuses, they would give them, something to say, congratulations on the movie. But that was just so massive.
Yeah.
That they realized, well, wait a minute, we can't not share this with the people that worked on the movies. And it was life-changing for a lot of us. And the industry in itself from that point forward grew massively. And it became a thing where all of a sudden you had students or people that you would talk to that want their kids to get into animation because they love to draw. Oh, my son or my daughter, she's always drawing. She loves animation. And then it would be like parents, I remember hearing this, like parents come in, oh, my son loves animation and we just want him to be an animator because he'll make good money. And you're like, oh, what?
Wait a minute,
really? Like it never crosses my mind, even to this day, about any choices I may create to do what I do, even to this new venture with Spire, it has very little to do with money.
Yeah.
It's mainly a creative sort of like, that will be exciting. I'm going to learn something here. I want to learn. So, and the great thing about animation is that you will learn every year that you are in it, you are going to learn something new. And 9 old men of Disney can tell you that. They worked well into their late 60s and they were constantly getting better. So that
I think it's amazing what you just said. As soon as I think, at least from my own life, and that's why I switched careers, as soon as you start thinking about how can you make more money, and that becomes part of your, I mean, to a certain extent, making more money is great, but when that's your focus on getting ahead, then it becomes a job and it becomes work, and it takes the fun away. But if you've been able to stay in the fun zone for 30 plus years, then hey, can I have your life? Can you have
come on down, Terry. You can come on down. I'll take your rainy, cold Toronto weather and you can come down here to California and enjoy this 100-degree temperature.
Okay. So what is something you learned in the last year yourself in, switching it up from Disney to Spire and taking on this role?
Well, I think just to sort of fill the gap. I mean, from Disney,
sure,
I left there. That's okay. It's okay. But I mean, anyways, I mean, the growth period of Disney was great all through the 90s. I left Disney in early 2000s, went to DreamWorks, and that's where I learned CG animation.
Yeah.
I went back to Disney and was working on Toy Story 3, but that was when Steve Jobs and Michael Eisner were fighting it out, and they were going to make sequels to all Pixar movies down in California or down in Los Angeles. But then Pixar is purchased by Disney, and then all the sequels to their movies will be done at Pixar. So that got shut down. And then I rolled into story with Glenn Keane on Rapunzel before it became Tangled. Worked on that, went back to 2D animation on Princess and the Frog, and then started seeing that, okay, well, maybe I want to try something different. Went back to DreamWorks. And this, by the way, is just, they're apart by about 4 miles. They're not that far apart. So I was just maybe getting off one exit earlier or later over 30 years. and then I went to DreamWorks and I started in animation, but then transitioned into story for the last, 9 or 10 years. So
Was
that
that
leads me to,
transition easy to do, being so experienced in, all the roles that you'd already been in, or was it tough kind of starting not from scratch, but in a totally different role?
not too bad, because I had done story prior at Disney. I had played a role a little bit in Tarzan. I worked on Tarzan and I did some storyboarding for a couple months there, and I loved it, and I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
So you decided to take an opportunity that came up in story, or did you kind of?
Yeah, well, the opportunity at DreamWorks was to do a combination film of 2D and CG. But the 2D was going to be all done on a as everybody draws now, on a Cintiq, on a tablet, and it was going to be, the program that they had was going to be able to bring that stuff into a 3D environment, and it was just kind of groundbreaking at the moment, and it was not really all figured out, which was exciting. I thought, okay, this is going to be cool. We're trying something new. And I think that was the trigger for me, was that it was something new, something unproven. Let's see if we can do it. So there was a challenge in there. Sadly, only because the company was going through its own issues as far as movies not making as much money, they had to start shutting down films. That was one of them that they did. So then I transitioned into story at that point. And I, again, had done story before. And so the transition into that wasn't too hard. But my confidence was sort of not at the best. I mean, eventually you feel like maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm old with this, maybe, maybe this isn't for me anymore. And I sort of lost a little bit of my passion for animating. So to the point earlier of, like, if you're going to do it for money, animation is super hard. If you lose your passion for animation and you're still doing it, it's super, super hard. So I would have to go into work, and I just wasn't mentally there for it. And I would just say, okay, here I go. I got to animate a character that's smiling and it's doing all this. Okay, let me just get into it was really hard. And it shows. It totally shows in your work. And I just decided at that point, when the movie was being shut down, that maybe I can transition back into story, for two reasons. One, because I enjoyed it. It's very much more lifestyle friendly kind of occupation than animation. And I just needed to get my confidence back.
Yeah.
And it was, it was not an easy time, but thankfully I got back into it again. And, you start boarding a sequence, you show it, they go, hey, that looks great. Let's cut it in. You go, oh, okay. There we go. I did it again. Oh, okay.
They bought it.
Hey.
I'm okay
smoking
after
mirrors
all.
again. I'm smoking in mirrors again. But then it just kind of kept rolling, and I got more and more into it, and I just really enjoyed the ability to do it anywhere. I could do it at home. I could sit outside, and I don't know if maybe some of your listeners or even yourself have been to DreamWorks, but it's an amazingly beautiful campus to work. So I could take my script, I can get a cup of coffee, I can sit outside by the lagoon that they have and just work. I can doodle and maybe that. And I'm like, wow, I'm sitting here and I'm working.
So fun.
It was, I mean,
instead of hunched over a Cintiq in a dark room.
Exactly. Everybody, all the animators I knew that had windows, shut the windows down. Everything's black and dark. And I'm just like, no, I've done that. I'm kind of past it. And then I think as I progressed through the 9 or 10 years at DreamWorks doing story, I think where I'm at now at Spire, it's very clear to me that all these choices that I've made throughout my career have always been based on me wanting to learn, or I've stopped learning and I need to learn. I'm craving to learn. So, I mean, I can go through these benchmark moments of, like, from the first time I started at Disney, I need to learn, working with Glenn Keane in story on Rapunzel. I'm learning again. He's showing me I'm not doing things right. Fix this. Oh, okay. I'm learning. I like this. It stimulates a lot of, interest and love for trying to do better.
Yeah.
And
Do
I
you
think
feel
that was,
you get some kind of internal thing that's saying like, I've maybe not like perfected or mastered this, but the amount of learning I have left is exponentially decreasing, and then that kind of drives you to follow a different path?
I think so. I think there's a little bit of that, and I think it's also trying to fight the stigma, I guess, of people thinking, well, you've been doing this a long time, so you probably don't want to learn anything new,
Uh,
or you're probably past that, or like
and you're like,
your
no,
ideas
not
are
me.
your, yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I do. I just think, well, I'm not like what you think. I get underestimated. I think through my whole career, I've always been underestimated as being like, oh, you're this kind of artist, this kind of, you're that kind of person. And then a lot of times they find out that they're wrong. And and I think that is another one that I can see, and I've seen with people around me that are around my age or younger, that find themselves being not able to continue, and it's maybe because they get pegged as being like they're not going to give us anything new.
Yeah,
So I think to myself, well, how do I avoid that? And part of it is just going someplace and being able to keep learning and be willing to learn. Like I don't care how old or young you are. If you're going to teach me something I don't know, I'm happy to hear it. You know, I'm more than happy to hear it.
totally. I hope you don't lose that drive. I've definitely worked with people where, oh, they've been there for a long time. They're going to give you exactly what you expect, and they're just kind of there to do their day job. And I feel like there's sometimes I feel like some people get like that because there's risk associated with learning something new, and if you're risk adverse, you might just be comfortable staying in the same place. But it sounds like you've followed the thing. Maybe you don't consider it risk, but that's
Well, there is, but there's vulnerable. You get vulnerable, right? I mean,
yeah,
you feel you artistically, you become a little bit vulnerable to failure, and I think there's a fear that if you've been doing it 20 years or more and you fail, then you feel like people are just not going to, you know, they're well, he or she's finished. They've given us everything they can.
right.
Let's get somebody else. But I'm more in the mindset of going, I might not get right. I might not do it exactly the way you want, but let's work together and get it better. I'm going to show you that same energy as I was when I was 23.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep giving it as much as I can to show that I can get you where you want to go with your movie. I'm more than happy to do that.
Well, I think that's amazing attitude to have. So let me ask you this: you've come from all the big culturally impactful films, learned your way up, done some amazing things. You've won awards, and now what excites you about this new role, and what are you learning currently about, storytelling and filmmaking that's put you in this place? What is the thing that you want to accomplish slash what's exciting you?
Well, I mean, to join Spire, well, the role, I mean, it's being a creative director. So you're sitting in a higher seat as it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself to me was engaging to me because you have a little bit more of a say in the crafting of a film. Now you put that in a place like Spire, which we don't really have any rules. We don't have a style. We're brand new, but we have a lot of people that are working with us. I mean, when I started, we were six of us, but everybody was like 30 years experience. So there's a lot of experience, but I'll roll back to that moment where I met everybody because I knew Brad Lewis, who's our co-founder of the studio. I knew him from working with him on Dragons, and he's our Kevin Bacon. He's the one who connects us all,
Yeah.
right? He's the one that connects everybody. Everybody knows Brad. So, so that itself was like, okay, I'm going to go meet all these people I'm going to be working with for the first time, and then you find out that they're not too indifferent than me. Like, hey, he thinks a lot like I do. Or she's been in this as long as I have, and she thinks like me. Well, that's interesting. Like we're all kind of looking for the same thing, which is to again be inspired by stuff that we have a bigger hand in creating. And I think that's the exciting new learning part about this, is that we're all trying to do something that hasn't been done. I mean, it has been done, but we don't have anything. I mean, so we're trying to create our own sort of pocket within this industry to make movies that are going to be I mean, we're not going to be reinventing the wheel here. I mean, these movies have all been made before, but we're going to try to make ours in a way that you're just going to go, well, the goal is to say, if you saw the movie, you're not going to go, oh, that was like that Disney movie I saw, or oh, that was like that Pixar. If we can get people to say, this is like, that Spire movie was really fun. I really enjoyed that. Like, if we can get there and not have them say, oh, it's like that Disney movie, that
Yeah,
one came out a
that's
couple
so
years ago.
tough.
It's hard, but there's the challenge, right? There's the goal and the energy that we all have to try to see if we can put a movie forward that's going to make you go, I really enjoyed that film.
Yeah.
And it's not like other ones I've seen,
It's its own
or
thing.
it's its own thing.
Man,
So
that's so tough, because like even finding a style, it's like, there's all these established styles, and then there's new styles coming out all the time that just kind of don't work. Like even that itself, and storytelling, like, the hero's journey, the classic couple of songs in there, like,
yeah. Well, and I think that's the benefit. I think I look back and the one benefit of certainly working at Disney and DreamWorks. I mean, DreamWorks tried so hard to not be Disney.
yeah.
They were, I mean, in those days when Jeffrey was doing it, he was like, we are not Disney. We don't do Disney style. We have our own thing. And you go, okay, what is our style? We don't have one. And you're like, what? You don't have one? No, but we're not like Disney. As long as it doesn't look like Disney, we're okay. But so they floundered, I think, in their visual direction of what they were, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like when they did Madagascar, that was like all of a sudden you go, oh, like the whole industry kind of wakes up to go, oh, wow, look at that. Nobody's doing that. And then they hit it again with dragons, but more on the first How to Train Your Dragon was visually bringing in Roger Deakins, having him help you with the cinematography, making part of your frame super dark. You can't even see stuff, because prior to that, CG animation is, if it was built, it's lit. You get to see everything.
Yeah.
It's not like we're just going to focus on the character. We're going to light the whole room so that you can see everything that was made.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing. But Roger's like, no, let's just make that all dark. We just see the character's one side of his face, and that blew people's minds. So it opened up a lot of, and that's when they started to kind of get their style. And then you start to say, okay, well, that makes you feel like your style will be shown by basically what you put forward. As far as, I mean, you could ask me like, well, what's Spire's style? And I don't know. We don't know yet.
I'll watch it when it comes out and I'll tell you.
Yeah. And hopefully you won't say it's a lot like ...
Yeah, right. Or I'll say it won't, but you can read between what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's amazingly ambitious, and it's like exactly what I think is needed in the marketplace right now, because I feel there's some saturation going on, as every animation studio is trying to accomplish kind of this thing. So I think, sounds like you have an amazing mix, yourself included.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm super happy with the amount of people that we have been able to connect with that are going to be joining us, and the people that I started with. The great thing is that everybody's wanting to go the same direction. Everybody wants to do the same thing, and it's just a matter of us not falling off that road. Stay on the road. It might look a little rocky, it might get bumpy, it might not look great at times, but we have to keep on that road and keep going, because we got to believe that where we're going is the right direction. And it very much the same feeling I have through my own personal career, which is this the right thing to do? Should I really be doing this for a job? Is this going to really pay my bills? Is this really can I do this for like a whole life?
Yeah.
And I guess I can.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
Well,
I haven't screwed up too badly.
Yeah, I guess as we're wrapping up, you've shared your amazing journey from way back, Sheridan 80s to Disney, to DreamWorks and back, and now it's Spire. And you dropped a lot of good tidbits along the way. Is there anything else that you wanted to share as we're kind of wrapping up here?
Well, I mean, just for any of your younger listeners out there, I mean, I think it's great that if anybody has that desire to do this for a career and you love it, then just embrace it and take it where it takes you, and don't give up on it, because it's not easy road sometimes. Sometimes it's hard, but that's just part of the journey. But if you keep it in that love of the craft of animated movies or animated TV, it doesn't matter. I think it's a wonderful life to have, and you'll never feel like you're working. That's the greatest thing about it. You'll never feel like you have a job.
And if you do, get out.
Get out. Go,
get into story. No, I think that's great, and it can be intimidating. Like, I'm only at the start of my career, and sometimes I feel way in my own head about this. Like, oh my gosh, it's already a lot of work in these areas, and trying to catch up. Like, is this something I want to do? But then, when I'm in the zone, it's just so fantastic. Time stops. I'm not thinking about anything else, and then you come home at the end of the day, and you're like, oh, I can somehow put food on the table, and it's all right.
Well, exactly. And the great thing is that now there's so many different types of animation, so many different platforms in which to showcase animation. So it's fantastic for students, people brand new to animation. It's got a lot of potential for growth, and you can make yourself a nice, happy living being an animator.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end off on. And thank you so much for coming on the chat, Mike. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much, Terry. Thanks for having me.
And if you're listening and you want to get in touch with Mike or check out his work, I'm going to include his LinkedIn and Instagram. His Instagram is michael.surrey. So you can look those up in the description of the chat. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.